everyone, welcome back. It's Christina again with the Artist Pod, and today we'll be talking about how to draw a chicken. As always, I'm using a Wacom Intros Pro tablet, and I'm drawing straight into Photoshop. So, let's get arting. Alright, so, this is the chicken. So, we're going to do white, yellow beak, yellow eyes, and red, I don't know what they're called, red fleshy dupers. So, right, since the middle is taken up, right, because we have the thing, and I'm going to do some freehand here where I made this pretty straight. I'm going to give it some characteristics as I'm drawing. I'm going to kind of do that as I go. We're going to draw the feathers out, much like we would with fur, where it's one line in between the others. It still gives the same kind of quality. So we'll draw to the edge of the eye, and then up and over, being careful by the eye. Kind of all going out from that point in the middle, right? Oh, and then I'm just gonna do the thing that I didn't do. All right. So redrawing it in my head, right? Just sort of starting those lines from a different spot, having wobble to it. Because when you look at it, it's kind of this big, fleshy, I don't know, weird sort of looking thing. So we'll do the same thing kind of on the other side. I did it a little bit on the other side, but not as much as I think it would really need. Back side of the eye, we kind of, you know, loop this down and then meet that with what's down here. We have that, the feather direction going down. Right. Just like we would with an animal with fur. Right, and then giving him a little bit of some ruffly cheeks. Little startled chicken face here. And just bringing this straight down, right? And then there's a distinct, complete split down the middle with its beak and everything else, but that's all right. Okay, so I'm going to do the same thing over here, right? Starting with that angle, going straight to the edge of the eye, and then having, you know, above the eye kind of swooping up, and then under the eye swooping down. And just like I did on the other one, some free form over this middle section. Right, there we go. And once we add in, you know, this is just kind of an extra sketching step, so once we add in highlights and shadows, it'll make a lot more sense. This is just sort of solidifying what we have. Okay, so I'm going to finish out this side in white, and I will be right back. Alright, so now we have the red. So I should have gotten the color sort of set up before now, but I didn't. Just didn't. So I'm just going to, for now do that, but if I need to, I can change it. Right, and so this is for that kind of fleshy, I don't know, thing that they have. I really don't know what it's called. I should look it up, so I'm not just constantly going this weird fleshy thing that chickens have in their faces. Right. But it's a little bit more, you can see I'm being a little bit more squiggly with my lines. Anytime I'm dealing with something that's not feathers or fur, when it's fleshier, like with snails or something else, giving it like a little bit extra texture, where there's that little bit of extra like swooping about it, can really kind of help, especially because, you know, with snails, with this part on chickens, like this would have some extra texture to it. I'm going to make it a little taller than I did, So once again, just sort of free-forming that a little bit. But you can see it's just kind of a alternating, getting my strokes up and down. It's a quick way to add like a lot of like little texture in here. So if I take it off, that's how it's looking so far. Same thing down here, but I won't be changing these. I'll just follow what I've already drawn. Right, sort of bring that down and around and there. Same thing over here. Then we'll have the yellow of the beak, and we'll get the eyes later. Okay. So that's how we're doing so far. I think that's looking good. All right. So then the yellow. Once again, I didn't sort this out ahead of time. Usually I do. I get all the colors ready, but I didn't. All right. Just like I did with the other, I'm going down to the sketch layer to indicate my color. Okay, and now for the beak. So we'll have a line coming straight down, and then, you know, now the lines can kind of taper to the side. That's a way to avoid line conflicts. It's not much because there's not much to the beak. There'll be a little bit on one of the cheeks, but we'll get that when we're doing highlights and shadowing. On the inside of the mouth here. Because there won't be a whole lot. And down here, same thing. You know, we're going to come straight down, and then we'll rotate off to the side. All the way. And same thing on the other side. Bring it over all the way. Okay. Now, well, now he looks like he's screaming. I'm gonna pop that back though. Okay. So now we'll start on the highlights and the shadows. I'm gonna say the light source is coming from above and to the right. As always, that means above and in front of, not behind or next to. So it's kind of in front of, looking down, like you're looking towards on the same side as the sun. So one of the best ways to get some good highlighting. So all edges will still be in shadow, you know, even down here. So that shadow, that's light pin pressure, not putting a ton of pressure here, just lines, very, very light lines. Right, and the edge, it's going into shadow because the face is rounding away, right? Like it's rounding towards the backside of the figure. It's how we sort of indicate shadows and highlights depth, is by giving it just that little bit of roundness. Of course, that depends on where the highlight's coming from, but from a highlight that's above and in front of, all edges would be in shadow. If it were directly on the side, that's different. Directly on the side, it would in fact have some highlighting right on the side. And if the light source is in the back, the same thing. The sides would be in highlight, but then the face would be in shadow. So I always imagine my light source as being above and in front of, because I want to get the most out of making sure my subject is nice and, you know, illuminated nicely. Right, so we have the shadow on that side. On the back side here, our shadow is going to be bigger. You also have some shadowing that'll be by that fleshy thing up the middle of its face. So there'll be some right through here as it gets highlights and shadows on that side. All right, filling in. And then, of course, on the back side, a little bit more. On this side than on the other. As it rounds away, there would still be some highlight hitting the face. And even though with a chicken you wouldn't do that, of course this is a cartoon chicken, but even if I were drawing this realistically. I tend to add a little bit of burst under the eye, and that's because eyes are so important. We tend to look at eyes first before we look at a lot of other things. Just it's natural as humans. It's what we do. That's how we're making contact. It's how we communicate. And so because of that, eyes are particularly important. So I always give a little burst of highlight under the eye on the opposite side, even though in theory that would only be reserved for predators because their eyes are more forward-facing. Prey animal like a donkey, chicken, their eyes are to the side. So with a light source above and to the right, you wouldn't necessarily have a highlight under the eye. But we're attuned to look at eyes, so it's just another way to highlight the eyes. So right, giving it a little bit of oomph here as we bring it down. And you can see it gives me a nice long kind of runway this way. So I have enough room to add in my shadows. Especially, it's kind of nice having the split in the face. As strange as that may seem. Around this, just kind of down, so it makes sense. All right. Rest of this should be highlight. Just thinking there might be like a little bit of shadowing under some of these bulges in the fleshy thing here. From the nature of it. But everything else, including down to here, I think would be highlight. So that's going to be full pin pressure, right? You can see the difference here as I take on the full pin pressure. How different that looks. So it's full pin pressure up to the point where I'm going to bring it into an area that I've already added lines. So up in here, right up into the shadow. The way I'm going to add highlight here is not with more pin pressure, but with more lines, which is an effective way to brighten up something. And when you're pushing this highlight into the shadow, it's a way to make sure the line isn't jarring and that you can make a smooth transition from highlight to shadow. So that's why I do that. So it'll just be more lines, but otherwise it's full pin pressure. Right down in here, this is full pin pressure. Because I don't have to worry about it sort of blending into something, except these little tiny bits of shadow. But otherwise, now in theory I could do, which I'll do sometimes, a little bit of shadowing right through here on the eye. Not doing that this time. I could though. Because our eyes are a circular bulge in our heads, I don't always do it. Because we don't have to have it for us to read it correctly. Sometimes I do it. Right, so that light pin pressure, but extra lines up in here. That slowly transitions into full pin pressure instead. So if I take off that sketch layer, that's how it's looking so far. Right, and then we'll just keep building. So usually I kick off the sketch layer. I leave it on when I'm doing these more cartoonish styles because I have a hard time figuring out where I intended the eyebrows to be. So I'll leave it on so I can kind of see where the eyebrow is supposed to go, and I can make sure I am doing right by it. I could do it on the fly, but it's easier, it's always easier to work from the sketch that's already here. Because then I've already sketched it out. I don't have to think about anything. It's one less thing to think about while I'm drawing. You're doing so much. You're trying to make sure that highlights are in place, that I'm not misplacing something, that everything's blended together nicely. And so I don't really want to spend the extra brain power if I don't have to. And so leaving the sketch on, and just until I get the eyebrows in place. because I need it off to blend everything nicely, but just until I get the eyebrows in place, probably until I get the mouth. And then be content to take it off. Oh, and the eyes. Just the things that are a little bit more delicate, I guess. Top of the beak wouldn't matter as much. But like down in here would, because I don't do the best job when I'm sketching, making sure that's nice and even, because I don't, you don't really need to. And so, there's often little gaps, and I just need to make sure I am understanding what lines I'm putting in where. Right, so if I pop this off now, I'd be fine to continue the side without any of that, because I can see where everything else is. Nice and easy. And it's all, there's no like color change. But see, backing off that pin pressure, just adding in more lines as I'm blending it in. And then adding that full pin pressure once we pull away a little bit. Just following the same lines I've already sketched, right? So I'm not making new lines here. I'm following these lines I've already put in. Even if they're at awkward angles for me. It's kind of looking like a chicken. Hopefully once we add all the highlights and shadows, it'll look nice and startled. But it helps to take it off. The sketch layer, because I can see better where my lines are, right? Like I can see that this isn't blended very nicely. There's a little bit, but it could be better. So I can blend this in. So I don't want a distinct line where it's transitioning from highlight to shadow. So I want to make sure it's like nice and even. So I'll always take my sketch layer off so I can see that better. It'd be one thing if I were working the sketch layer into, if I'd sketched it out in white, that'd be different, but that's not what I'm doing. You certainly could incorporate that sketch layer into the final drawing, but when I'm working in Photoshop, I usually don't. Alright, so I'm going to get the rest of the highlight done on the whole face, and I'll be right back. Alright, so now we're going to get the red, but first I'm just going to fill a little bit more of this in. Just some like edges, which might change out once we add the red, but okay. So yeah, okay. So with the light source coming from above and to the right, so this is like a hoop, which means on the back side you're gonna have the shadowing. And just like I was when I was adding in the all of these sketch lines in here, I'm also drawing in that same way, kind of this up down, right? Like I'm doing line, bunch of lines. It's gonna help create that texture. So just sort of sticking to that pattern and pushing it a little further than I have to, because it helps me have a little bit of a runway as I'm deciding the edge between light and shadow. Now these little red flaps at the top, oh, I don't know what just happened there. Voice just gave out. tend to be a bit flattish. So I'm certainly, and I'm creating an up and down on the top. You'll see it in a lot of them. A lot of chickens like this, you know, their little flap goes kind of up and down and up and down. I'm trying to give that sensation. I mean, again, all edges are in shadow, so still doing those edge, that edge, those edge. And then we'll line that up so that it's running behind the white. And just making sure this is a little bit clearer of a line. Right. Now as it's kind of coming in over here, I'm going to do the same thing, just kind of on the edge of it, because it, I don't know, I'm guessing it sort of rotates underneath just a bit. And then under as it's coming down. Right. I guess that would be an edge. Alright. Now, we'll add that full pin pressure, still doing the same thing, right? And you can really see it now. And then fading off the pressure to more lines where I'm blending it in, right? So this is just more lines to make it brighter instead of more pin pressure, so it doesn't make the line itself bolder. And then down here in the middle, easy enough to make the lines themselves bolder. Now something I will be doing that might be interesting. We'll see how it goes. It's doing this whole thing is bright, right, so that it looks like it's flopping over. With maybe a little bit of like a shift where it's flopped, so that there's a clear indication here of like delineation. We'll see how that looks. So I'm going to get the rest of this highlighted and I'll be right back. Alright, and then we have, you know, the two bits down here. Same thing, where that back side is going to be in shadow, and the tip, and the front side, because all edges are in shadow, but more so on the back edge. And then the same on this. Alright, so I'm going to finish out these two, and I will be right back. Now, for the yellow, right, kind of same thing as before. You have the beak coming on the back side, so obviously there'd be some shadow back here. Underneath, as the beak rolls down, some shadow where it would have been connecting, you know, where you have the mouth, where it's kind of rolling under. All the way over. But this won't have shadow all the way around the edge because it's not, you know, it's not like a, it's not fully twisting away from the light source. I'm going to do some up here though. I'm feeling that's kind of poking out. Alright, so then it's just a matter of determining exactly where shadow and highlight would switch over on the beak. But, you know, you would have at least a lot of this and highlight. Nice bright. And once again, as I'm getting down where I'm blending it, just backing off my pin pressure and adding more lines. And that's all the way across, so you'd have highlight at least all the way to the middle, and then the beak, you know, kind of going off on the other side. So this is where it's a little bit more of a cartoon, and I didn't really do that with the face, so we're going to pull the highlight a little further over. Before we start tapering it off. I am doing backed off pin pressure right here though to kind of, this is going to let me be able to sort out what's what. And I'm going to do a little burst here where it flattens itself out. Not much, just like indicate that there's a different layer to the beak, right? And now we'll do the same thing underneath, right? We have all of this. In fact, I'm probably going to do the whole thing in shadow. Might be the easiest thing. And then figure out the highlights, because there is not a ton of room to work with, and anytime I am dealing with limited room, I'm much more inclined to put in shadows first, because it's easier to add highlights and take them away. So if I add shadows first, it's easier to deduce where highlights would be without having those harsh, like, dedicated lines. I can have those lighter lines. Right, so we're going to do this very light. And then will be the mouth, which we'll do partly yellow, I guess. Okay. So, just like the top, right, we're going to have some highlighting over here. And along that side, although not underneath, so can't push it but so far because we run out of room. Leaving a gap because all edges are in shadow. And again, I'm just adding more lines, not more pin pressure. Bringing it over, just like we did up top, past that point, and then fading it off. Past that midpoint, I should say. And then fading it off. Right, so that midpoint, right through here, should have a pretty good highlight. Okay. Now is the edge of the mouth. So I'm going to do a little bit of a beak over here. Probably should do just a little bit over here too, where like the edge would be catching. Maybe some light. Well, my aim over here is really horrible. It's like I've never drawn before. There we go. Okay. Now, probably need something I didn't consider, is the inside would be pink, but not like this red. I'm just getting this for reference. I'm going to pull this up to a little bit more orange and fade it out. Desaturate it a little bit. Which means I'm going to come back down here to the sketch layer and give it another little. Okay. So with the light source coming in the way it is, there might be some light catching the cheek in here, but it's going to fade away, right? So I'm going to have a little bit of light, or a few lines coming right on the edge where I had the yellow, and then making them not as long and putting less lines as I push it more towards that center. I'll do just a little bit over here, but not nearly as much before the same thing happens, right? That gives the indication that it's going into a recess. If we really wanted to, we could add like the indication of a tongue or something. Coming over. That might be hitting the light. That's then fading into nothingness back here. Right, it kind of grounds the mouth a bit, but also make sure it's pretty faded. Let me push it up to the edge. And then if I wanted to, I could add just a little bit of like highlighting. Right, like down the middle. Like just a little bit. Yeah. All right. So now we're going to get that same yellow. And to the eyes. Ooh, I am going to pop you back on though. Okay. So you would have the pupil. Both cases. I need to fix that, that's all right. And then, you just circle out where the eye would be. Preferably better than what I just did. Same thing over here. Circle out where that eye would be. And then I'll take off that sketch layer. Right, and then just sort of fill it in very, very lightly. Fill in. Same thing over here, very, very lightly. So we'll add highlights to it. We won't have much to do because we're going to have to add the whites around the eyes. Now he looks properly startled. Alright, I am going to still take the elliptical Maki tool and use it to make sure that the pupils are the same size. Right, so come over here, I'm going to delete and then inverse the selection and come back and fill in a little bit more of the eye. And I'm not going to follow the same lines, right? So it'll create a little bit more of a crosshatch effect. And then select inverse it again. Reselect elliptical Maki and drag it over to the other eye. Line it up. Erase again, and then select inverse and do the same thing that I did for the other one. Okay. Now, I'm going to add highlights So light source above and to the right, which means on the left against the pupil, left and underneath on both sides, there's going to be a nice big burst. Although on the left, that left one I did a little too much. A little further down. But nice big burst. And then on the side of the light source, see there's not a lot of room here. You would have the highlight to the edge, like it would fade out at the edge, and it would fade out on the back side a bit, although with it being so small, might change it a bit. And then up top, fading that. Still giving it a little burst because it's so small. Right, you wouldn't have not a ton of room to do a lot with the limited amount of space that we have here. And then same thing on the other side. Right, fading out that edge. So all of our irises have like a little dark band around them, so I always fade it out to black at the edge. Underneath, but fade it out here. Come around here. And up. Okay. It's okay that they're different sizes. That adds to that shock that he's currently experiencing. And we're going to do the white of the eyes. So that's just going to follow the edge of the, I'm going to drag it underneath. But it's going to follow the edge of the iris, right? I'm just going to do that circle. And then expand from there. So I'm going to do that with both of them for the whites of the eyes, and I'll be right back. Now we're going to add some highlights to the white. Same rule as the other, kind of. So highlight on the side of the light source, going up to, I'm going to change this a little bit, sorry. Going up to the edge of the pupil, but letting that dark line kind of stand, right? And then following the edge like the eye, right? You have that loop with the eye, so that's where the highlight's going to be. And then underneath the eye, it would go into darkness, so you'd have that shadow underneath. And then all the way under, right? You have that highlight going into shadow as it gets all the way under here, gets all the way underneath there. And then as we come to this side, a little bit more shadow, but not as much as the top. Same thing, we're going to follow that edge down. Right, all the way under. And then we're going to fade this out. So blend it a bit better than what I did, basically. Okay, then we're going to do the same thing on this side. About halfway up, have that follow it down, edge goes into shadow. Don't draw over the yellow. That's not what you should do at all. Bring it under though. All the way down until you start fading it out at the bottom. And on the far side you have more of a faded that follows that edge of of the eyelid, basically. That's what's happening. And then blending this a little better. Yeah. Okay. And then I'm going to come up here, grab the elliptical marquee tool. I'm going to zoom in for this. And do a little light flare. It's already white, we know that, so just edit, fill, foreground color. Okay, and then drag it to the other side. Do the same thing over here. Just make sure it's roughly in the right spot. It's the same as the other side, and that it is in the highlighted part of the eye. Yeah, the only thing I'm going to do is fix a little of this. Make it look a little smoother. Same thing over here. There you go. That's how you draw a screaming chicken. Alright, so that's how you draw a chicken, startled chicken. I hope that was helpful. In the floating nether next to me I have other videos of art tutorials I have done, and I will see you all soon. Thank you so much. Take care.